On today's show, the Houston Rockets get absolutely embarrassed by the Portland Trailblazers in overtime. Why were the Blazers even in this game to begin with? What has happened to the Houston Rockets' once top-rated defense that has just completely fallen off a cliff as of late? How did they choke this game away in overtime? We're going to unpack it all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh my, that's the no look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Here comes Tari.
No!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Worst loss of the season. At least I think it's the worst loss of the season. What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Now, today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym, while you're crying tears of sadness because the Rockets just got their butts kicked by the Portland freaking Trailblazers. Thank you for being it every day and making the show part of your day every single day. This game sucked. This game really sucked. I think it was when Brogdon hit the corner three to pull the Rockets within one. I think I remember tweeting or saying, I was like, they're going to lose this game, aren't they? And lo and behold, they managed to choke away this game. They led by 4 with less than a minute to go. And the Rockets managed to choke this game away. This was a really impressive choke job, all things considered. So there's a lot of reasons why the Rockets lost this game ultimately. And we're going to unpack or do our best to unpack a lot of them here on the show. Cause I sat down to try and record this show the night of, and I was so mad about the loss that I just couldn't do it. And then the morning after, I got up and I had all my show prep stuff done. And, I was still so mad. I was just like, I can't even talk about this team right now. They're pissing me off too much. The Rockets had no business. The Rockets had no business even letting the Blazers be in this game. Look, yes, you're missing. They were missing Jabari Smith Jr. They still didn't have Tari Eason. I get that, but this is a bad Blazers team, and this is what the Rockets they deserve this loss because they did not take the Blazers seriously, because they went through the motions. They had a 6-point lead at halftime, and then Ime Udoka said at postgame they absolutely got embarrassed in that third quarter, allowing the Blazers to score 41 points in the quarter. Their defense has basically been non-existent for a little while now, and it especially was non-existent there in the third quarter. The Rockets had no answer all night long for Anthony Simons, and we're going to get into more of why that is and some specifics with Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet and all this. But what's really egregious here for me is, you let a team like that hang around, and you give them hope, right? You give them life at the end of a game. And that's exactly what happened. They had that one scrambling defensive possession late in the game where Malcolm Brogdon managed to sink a corner three-pointer because the Rockets were scrambling on defense and nobody was able to get out to him in time. He hits the corner three-pointer, makes it a one-possession game. Rockets inbound the ball. Blazers had a foul to give. They inbound the ball again. Aaron Holiday gets it, knocks down 2 very clutch free throws. Shout out Aaron Holiday, hits the free throws, big time. It's a 3-point game with less than 2 seconds to go. And you got Boban Marjanovic on the inbounds. And somehow, by some miracle, they get the ball inbounded to Jeremy Grant. Fred VanVleet is the guy defending kind of that top of the key area. They're swapping everything. They're sending every guys every which way. The Rockets are communicating. They're doing a good job on the inbounds play. Fred VanVleet has to pick up Jeremy Grant. Jeremy Grant takes one dribble to the right, elevates, sends a Hail Mary towards the rim, and banks it in. And that forces overtime. And the Blazers took all that momentum from the end of regulation, and it carried them through overtime. And a big part of the reason they were able to carry themselves through overtime is because the Rockets forgot who their best player was. And this is not the first time this has happened, where Alperen Sengun had 6 points at the end of regulation. Alperen Sengun was feasting at the end of regulation. And seemingly, they just went away from him in overtime. It's the most confusing thing. He had that one move on DeAndre Ayton where he faced him up from the perimeter, drove, attacked him, spun back, reloaded, and then went like up and under and finished around Ayton at the rim. It was a filthy move. He also had the dunk right at the rim in transition off the, might I say, the beautiful feed from Jalen Green. But there was, it was almost all LP there in the closing moments of this game. 6 points in the final 3 minutes of the game, 4 minutes of the game. And then they made it to overtime. And in the overtime period, Alpi only took 2 shots. He was 1 of 2. He went to the free throw line and hit 1 of 2 there as well. But he only got 2 attempts. Fred took 3 shots. Jalen took 3 shots. And I just don't know why they elected to go away from Alperen Sengun, who was feasting in this game, dropped 30 points on DeAndre Ayton's head, and instead elected to go with Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green trying to take over the game from the perimeter when Fred was having a bad night shooting the ball, 8 of 17 shooting, only 2 of 10 from long distance. And Jalen was having a really good night, but he'd kind of cooled off by that point because for God knows what reason, the Rockets didn't go back to him to start the third quarter, even though he was on fire in the first half. So he had kind of cooled off a little bit at that point in the game. And I also think the looks that he was getting earlier in the game were very different than the looks that you get late in a game. You need a guy that can force the issue and force the opposing defense to make a choice, right? And Alperen Sengun is that guy. If you guard him in single coverage, he's either going to draw a foul or he's going to get a bucket. It's that simple. If you send a double team at him, he's going to find whoever the open man is and kick the ball out and generate a wide open look that way. That's the type of offensive player he is. And that's why this Rockets team is at its best when it's running offense through Alperen Sengun. Whether that's him posting up on the low block, whether it's him facing up on the perimeter or at the nail, whatever, letting him go to work is their best offensive play. And for them to go away from that in crunch time of a game where they shouldn't have even been in overtime to begin with, but they found themselves there, it's the most mind-boggling thing. It's like the Lakers not letting LeBron James touch the basketball late in the game, or the Mavs not letting Luka touch it, or the Nuggets not letting Jokic be involved in the plays late in the game. It makes zero sense to me. And I don't know what's going on the sideline. I don't know what's going on with Ime Udoka and the rest of the coaching staff, but he really does need to like send a message to his guys that at the end of a game, when they need a bucket, that's their play. They draw that, like, screw drawing up a play. Just get the ball to your best player and let him go to work. Because 9 times out of 10, it's going to end well for you. Or you at least, you live with the, like, if Alp draws a double team and you kick it out to an open shooter and that open shooter misses a shot, fine. You live with those looks. But like the look that, you know, some of the looks that Fred and Jalen were taking there in the overtime period were not good shots. You know, those are not shots that you're like okay with when you could have gotten a much higher quality look had you gone through your best player. So I wanted to highlight that because I thought that was the most egregious thing out of this loss against the Blazers, at least their late game execution. They could have still won this game had they not just forgotten who their best player was. But there's a lot more that I want to unpack from this one. A lot of concerns, a lot of things that, you know, frustrations that we've seen with this team. And it's almost like this game had a little bit of everything that's wrong with this Rockets team and things that they need to be able to address going forward if they want to be able to make a push for a play-in spot, because these are the types of games you can't lose if you want to be in the play-in conversation. The Rockets are very much battling for a play-in spot, one of the probably 9-10 spots in the Western Conference, and you cannot lose a game at home to the tanking Portland Trailblazers and expect to be able to make the play-in tournament. It doesn't work that way. This is one of those games. I'm hesitant to say must-win type games, because I don't know if any game is like really a must-win type game, but the Rockets should have won this game, and they deserved to lose this game for a variety of reasons, more of which we're going to unpack here in just a second. Specifically, a lot of the defensive issues in this game. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Grammarly. When it comes to writing, Grammarly is there to support you from start to finish. For over 10 years, Grammarly has been powered by AI technology that you can trust to help you across all the places where you write the most. And now, Grammarly helps you do even more. With one click, you can easily brainstorm, rewrite, and reply with suggestions based on your context and goals, so you can improve productivity for you and your team. I know I've gotten there before where I've just been having brain fog, not able to think of things. With Grammarly, it can even help you start out with ideas, outlines, all kinds of stuff. For me, as somebody who has to publish content on YouTube and come up with different, video titles and descriptions and all that kind of stuff, Grammarly can be incredibly helpful. You can give it a prompt, something like, give me 10 possible taglines for a video thumbnail, and it comes up with all these possible suggestions, and you can take them and tweak them yourself and add your own little flair and input. It's a great way to get you those starting level ideas to then be able to kind of get past any writer's block or anything that you might be experiencing. Maybe you've got a big presentation coming up at work. You can let Grammarly create a personalized outline to get you organized so you can transform your ideas into a compelling presentation. So start being more productive at work with Grammarly. Go to Grammarly.com/podcast to download for free today, because that is the best part. It's free to use. That's Grammarly.com, GARMMARLY.com/podcast. Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, because it's just you versus the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. It's that simple. PrizePicks is so easy to play. You can make your picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. They've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of different players and stat types, what makes PrizePicks the #1 DFS app on the market. PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So for football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only DFS platform with an injury insurance policy. So if you've been thinking about getting into daily fantasy sports, give PrizePicks a try. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA with promo code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. More to unpack from this Rockets 137-131 overtime loss to the Portland Trailblazers. And I think one of the biggest issues and concerns with this Rockets team is how much they have cratered defensively over this probably about month or so in comparison to earlier this season when they were actually a top tier defense in the association. And it's concerning because this team wasn't winning games because of their offense. They just weren't. They'd have some big games from, Sengun would have a big night or Fred would have a big, but they weren't just outgunning other teams. That has not been this team's identity all season long. In fact, every single time that they have been every single time that they've allowed an opponent to score over 120 points, I believe they've lost every single one of those games except for the Utah Jazz game. That was the first game all season long where an opponent had scored more than 120 points, and the Rockets had not lost that game, if I'm not mistaken. So what happened to the Rockets' defensive identity? Where did it go? I almost went into the where did you come from? Where did you go, old Cotton Eye Joe? No, look, I think some of it You can point to, obviously, the personnel issues and the fact that the Rockets were missing Dillon Brooks for a stretch of games, and they're still missing Tari Eason. They didn't have Jabari Smith Jr. in this game. Sure, that's some of it, absolutely. But that's not nearly all of it is the problem. And I think in this game, we saw some really concerning moments from Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks defensively. And I think some of it has to do with they're not 100% healthy. Dillon Brooks, who, is still playing through a little bit of discomfort or pain with the oblique injury. He does not look 100% because he's out there. He was getting blown by consistently in this game against the Blazers. Didn't matter who he was checking, if he was guarding Brogdon or Simons or Grant, whoever he was guarding on the perimeter, almost had a free run to the basket. It was pretty bad defense from Dillon Brooks. And then on top of that, so you've got Dillon Brooks, who's still dealing probably with the oblique stuff, and he does not look 100% because that's not the Dillon Brooks level of defense that he was playing earlier in this season, where he's like legitimately a one-man difference maker on the defensive side of the ball. He was actually a negative defensively in this game. Like, he was costing the Rockets points pretty consistently, and he got benched late in this game. Ime elected to go with Aaron Holiday instead of Dillon Brooks to close out this game until like the final, minute of regulation or whatever, where he subbed Dillon Brooks back in for defensive purposes, which we're going to get into some of Ime's decision making with his lineups here in just a moment, because I think that's another concerning trend that warrants discussion. So Dillon was not himself this game defensively, and Fred is now struggling defensively, where Fred does not look like he's the same level of player that he was earlier this season. And some of that probably has to do with the back issue that he's dealing with, the back tightness that he's going through. But he doesn't seem to have the same like lateral quickness, ability to keep a defender, to keep his assignment in front of him, to keep the offensive player in front of him when he's guarding at the point of attack. And that's where I think the Rockets' biggest issue is, and why we're seeing shades of, like Silas era defense almost, is because this team was built with the understanding that they needed to have great point of attack defense to prevent easy straight line drives to the basket, because they don't have the luxury of having a 7 foot tall, defensive minded shot blocker back there to swat everything that comes near the rim, right? They don't have a Brook Lopez back there. They don't have a Nick Claxton, a Rudy Gobert, a Walker Kessler, whatever. They don't have one of those bigs back there. They've got Alperen Sengun. And Alpe's not a slouch defensively, and he's improved in that regard. But if you're not gonna contain dribble penetration, and if you're gonna let guys just get straight past you on the perimeter, the Rockets defense has zero chance to survive, because then you've got Alp having to play two men. He's playing the roll man, and he's trying to guard the ball handler at the same time, and you've got guys fighting over screen. The defense is just a mess right now. It's regressed considerably to where Fred and Dillon have regressed defensively. In this game, Sengun was not doing enough on the glass for sure. And this has been I don't want to say a constant all season, but Alp is the man in the middle and has to be more of a presence in the rebounding department at times, especially without Jabari Smith Jr. in the lineup. But I think that the bigs for the Rockets in this game, Sengun, Jeff Green, they let the Rockets down from like the physicality perspective, because they allowed so many second chance opportunities from the Blazers in this game. The Blazers wound up scoring 23 second chance points in this game. They're one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the association, but that's almost an insurmountable total of second chance points to allow in a given game. And it's not like, unfortunately, like the Rockets, they had 12 second chance points. Like, they had a few offensive rebounds and got some second chance opportunities, but they need to be able to rely on closing defensive possessions strong. And even there late in overtime, when the game kind of looked like it was probably already going to be over, but they had moments where they would get a good defensive stop and then be unable to secure the defensive rebound to close out the possession. And that falls squarely on the shoulders of your bigs, of Sengun and, for this game, since there was no Jabari, Jeff Green. They needed to be better on the defensive glass to be able to give the Rockets a chance to get past the Blazers, who were like unconscious from three, especially after, especially after that third quarter where they were on fire. They couldn't miss. And a big part of why they couldn't miss is because they were given so many open opportunities. I really feel like the vets kind of let the Rockets down in this game, because Jalen delivered. Jalen was locked in, had a strong game, was knocking down his shots, was playing within the flow of the offense. You would have liked to see Jalen be a little bit more consistent from the perimeter, only 2 of 7 outside shooting, but that also means that he was 10 of 17 inside the arc. Those are phenomenal numbers for Jalen Green. He was taking what the defense gives him, and it looked really, really good. He was knocking down that midi, and he knocked down, 3, 4, 5 of those early on, and it opened up the rest of his game. So that's exactly the type of process that you want to see from Jalen Green. Alperen Sengun, aside from the shortcomings on the defensive glass and the 6 offensive rebounds, as well as the smattering of other offensive rebounds that other guys got, but the 6 offensive rebounds that DeAndre Ayton got, Sengun was phenomenal. He was much improved at the free throw line, shot 7 of 8 at the charity stripe. He had 30 points. He had 10 rebounds. He had 8 assists. He was doing everything out there. So in a way, I almost don't even want to pin the blame for this one on Jalen or on LP. I kind of think that the vets just let the Rockets down in this one. Like, you literally started your 3 veterans in Fred, Dillon, and Jeff Green. And I felt that Jeff Green was almost a non-factor in this game. Dillon was a negative piece in this game, which is why he got benched late. And Fred was out there because Fred is the extension of Ime Udoka, and he's, got that trust factor there, and he's kind of Ime's safety valve to where he doesn't want to take him off the floor. But Fred also played 46 minutes in this game, 45 minutes. Of an available 53 minutes, Fred played 45 of them. That just can't happen, man. Especially when when he's killing you on defense, when you need to be finding ways to give this guy some rest. And when Amin Thompson has looked as good as he has looked, I feel like you got to find a way to get Amin more minutes. Amin Thompson played only 14 minutes in this game. And you could have easily bumped him up another 5 or 10 and given Fred some rest. And I think we're seeing some of the side effects of how hard the Rockets were pushing earlier this season, especially with Fred and Dillon and the workload that those guys had. And now we're seeing some of that workload catch up to them, where now Fred's got the sore back. Dillon's going to be dealing with the oblique issue. It's probably not 100% yet, even though he's playing. Even though he's been cleared to return to play, he's probably not playing 100%. And so this team is not able to be as locked in and putting forth or exerting the effort that they were earlier in the season when they were a top defensive team. Because unfortunately, the way this team is built, you have to have guys locked in and preventing dribble penetration from starting at the 3-point line. You can't let those guys drive, and you can't give guys those free straight line drives to the basket, because then that's how the defense gets collapsed, and that's when guys get in rotation, and then that's when you give up the open threes. And Ime Udoka talked about it before the game, that 3-point defense has been their largest regression, and that 3-point defense comes from the fact that they're allowing the initial penetration at point of attack, where you're allowing your defense to be collapsed, which is then leading to kickouts and wide open threes. And there's also miscommunication at times where guys aren't switching clean enough, and there's slight moments where guys are being given, open shots because of miscommunications, like guys going under on a screen when they should be fighting over, little things here and there. And all these mistakes add up to a game like this, where you gave the Portland Trailblazers life. You gave them life in a game where they should have gotten absolutely dumpstered in this game. Second night of a back-to-back, Rockets had plenty of rest, and they messed around and didn't take this game seriously. Gave the Blazers a 41-point third quarter. Blazers led going into the fourth quarter, and the Rockets had to fight their way back in that fourth quarter to regain the lead. And even once they did regain the lead, they weren't composed enough down the stretch to close things out. This is just... That's why this game is frustrating. I can feel my blood kind of boiling as I'm talking about this game, because there was so much that went wrong in this game, And it still kind of feels like, even though they had so many different things go wrong, that they were right there. And again, it sucks because it's like, okay, maybe the Brogdon three doesn't go down, and the Blazers never get within 1 point, and we're talking about a win instead. Maybe the Jeremy Grant buzzer beater doesn't go down, and we're talking about a win instead because it rims out, or it misses front iron or air ball or whatever. But unfortunately, all these problems that we're highlighting here would have still been problems even if the Rockets had won the game. It would have been an ugly win, and we would have been thankful for the win because nobody's going to be ranking the quality of wins at the end of the season. But these are very real problems that this team is facing and that they have to find solutions for moving forward if they want to be able to make the play-in tournament this season. So I want to get into a couple of the positives, at least from this game. Mainly Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore off the Rockets bench, who continue to impress in the limited amount of minutes that they are getting. I want to talk about those two guys as well as some final thoughts from this one in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Hungryroot. Trying to eat a little healthier in 2024? Hungryroot is here to rescue you from the short-lived New Year's resolutions by making meal planning easy and nutritious. You can build healthy habits that won't disappear by February with Hungryroot. Hungryroot is the easiest way to get fresh, high-quality food delivered right to your doorstep. They've got healthy groceries and simple recipes all in one place. Hungryroot will recommend recipes and groceries based on your tastes. You just take their suggestions or choose anything you want. They've got fresh produce, high-quality meat and seafood, pantry staples, healthy snacks and sweets, and so much more. The best part is Hungryroot follows a simple standard. It's got to taste good, be quick to make, and contain whole, trusted ingredients. Right now, Hungryroot is offering Locked On Rockets listeners 40% off your delivery and fresh veggies for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/lockedon to get 40% off your first delivery and claim your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/lockedon. Don't forget to use our link so that they know that we sent you. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Final thoughts from this Rockets-Blazers game. Really frustrating loss. I want your thoughts. I asked you, was it the worst loss of the season? I think it's the worst loss of the season. But tell me what you're frustrated about from this game with the Rockets. Because for me, and I said this at the top of the second segment, right? I think you can point to the fact that, yes, this roster is missing key guys, and missing Tari is a big reason that the defense has cratered the way that it has. But at the same time, so much of it feels like the team has just taken a step back as far as how locked in they are, right? How serious they take every single possession. When I said I felt like the veterans kind of let the Rockets down in this game. There was a stretch there in the third quarter when the Blazers were on their insane run where both Dillon Brooks and Fred VanVleet had a pair of, like, I don't know if it was quite back to back, but they happened really within close frame, close enough to each other, where they had those back to back turnovers where they just lazily were passing the ball around the perimeter. And you've got Matisse Thybulle, who is an absolute ball hawk, and he stole the ball, just playing the passing lane. Very simple stuff, playing the passing lane both times. Easy transition opportunities both times. And it's all because they were throwing lazy passes around the perimeter, going through the motions, not taking the game seriously. And that cannot come from your veterans. Like, that's the type of behavior you expect from one of your young guys who doesn't know any better, who's just kind of like out there, vibes, whatever. Like, no, you cannot have that level of apathy or that level of carelessness from the veterans who are supposed to be your example, guys on the floor, the guys that you point to and say, you want to play like that guy. We want you playing like Fred. And then you can't say, I want you playing like Fred, and then Fred, coughs the ball up because he's throwing lazy passes around the perimeter or getting blown by defensively. That's not good. You can't do that. So I will say that the couple silver linings from this game, look, I'll give credit. Sengun had an incredible offensive night. He was phenomenal, facilitating at a high level, scoring at a high level. The rebounding, especially defensively, needed to be a little bit better, but that's not just on him. It's kind of a team collective thing. But I am looking at him and Jeff Green specifically. Dillon Brooks probably needs to be a little bit better on the rebounding department as well. But the team as a whole just needs to be better rebounding the basketball. You can't have a game like that, especially missing one of your best, arguably your best rebounder in Jabari Smith Jr., and the team didn't come together to make up for his lack of, for the fact that he wasn't playing. For Sengun, he was awesome offensively. For Jalen, I talked about his offensive game earlier. Was really impressed with what he did. And I kind of mentioned it in passing, but I was also really disappointed that the Rockets didn't go back to Jalen to start the third quarter. He played his third quarter stint. I think he played about 7 or 8 minutes in the third quarter before going to the bench. Or maybe it was slightly longer than that. But at one point, I looked, and I think it was about 8 or 9 minutes into the quarter, and Jalen had only attempted 4 shots in the third quarter, which to me seems unacceptable, right? The guy was on fire. He had 19 points in the first half of the game, and then you come out at halftime and you're not immediately running more offense to get him involved. That doesn't make any sense to me either. That's confusing. And this kind of goes into, I think I've had some serious concerns about some of Ime Udoka's decision-making these last few weeks, right? Certain lineups that he throws out, certain decisions to stick with certain guys or to not go back to certain guys. And this is not me saying, I think Ime is a bad coach. No, I think Ime is a great coach, but I think he has certain moments where he trusts one player more than another, or he's going to stick with a veteran over a young guy, even though the young guy's probably playing better. I even that final possession, I don't know who you could have maybe had in there instead of Fred VanVleet on the final possession of the game. I don't know if there was somebody that you should have had in there instead of Fred VanVleet on the final possession of the game. But it just sucks that the inbounds happened and you had Jeremy Grant, who's all of 6'9", able to elevate and shoot over Fred VanVleet, who's all of 6 feet tall. I get that Fred's one of the better defenders on the team and he's a high IQ guy, all that, but could you not have found a way to just throw out all your wing players, in that final moment? Because all you had to do was switch everything. And then there's even the argument of, why didn't they just foul? Why didn't they foul immediately on the inbounds? And some of that comes down to coaching, where Fred was doing his whole thing where, and I don't know if this was Fred's decision, if this is coached by Ime, but on the inbounds, Fred had his back to the inbounder. Fred couldn't see that the ball was being inbounded until it was literally over his head, and then he was having to make up ground to get up and D up on Jeremy Grant. So I don't know whose call that was, if that's how Ime wants it defended on the inbounds, or if that's how Fred defends the inbounds, or what. But I felt like that play gave enough breathing room to Jeremy Grant, where if you're not up in his body to deny the catch in the first place, that's what allowed him to get the ball, take the one gather dribble, and then elevate and shoot over the top of Fred. Going with, Aaron Holiday to close this game over Dillon Brooks made sense, but at the same time, but then you go back to Dillon Brooks in the final possessions of this game for defense, when Jalen was actually decent defensively in this game against some of the Blazers guards in Brogdon, Simons, while Dillon was getting cooked all night. There was a lot that really bothered me in this game, and I think one of the bigger things was how good Amin Thompson was playing, and how impactful he's been as a defensive piece for this team. He's one of the team's best defenders already as a rookie. He's really impactful on that end. And yet, in a game where it felt like you needed an answer to slowing down Anthony Simons, or potentially also an answer to slowing down Malcolm Brogdon, who really got it going in overtime, and you've got a guy who could be, a stopper for either of those two guards sitting on the bench in Amin Thompson, and he manages to only get 14 minutes of run. Meanwhile, Fred VanVleet is playing 45 minutes. This is not me clamoring for Fred's minutes to be reduced so Amin can get more minutes, but just find a way to have them coexist, right? Dillon was struggling all night. Maybe you take away some of his minutes. If you need to have Fred on the floor that much, sure. And then I get there's spacing issues. There's a lot that I get that this team is trying to juggle and figure out and all this, but this game was just a really frustrating display of a lot of bad stuff going wrong and a bad team getting hot at the wrong time and a good team playing down to the level of their opponent. But I am still really impressed with Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore. I want to at least end on a bit of a positive note here because I've kind of railed on this team. I needed to vent a little bit because this loss just really upset me for a bunch of reasons. But for Amin Thompson, he's become a difference maker defensively. He's completely erased a layup attempt by Scoot Henderson right at the rim. Just completely like two-handed, like volleyball swat kind of block on Scoot Henderson right under the basket. But Amin, he had 6 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, had that 1 block, 3 of 5 shooting in 14 minutes played some really stellar defense when he was out there on the floor. He moves his feet well. He's got active hands. You see the length whenever he's contesting shots. Like, it's really hard for guys to shoot over the top of Amin Thompson. So his defense has been next level, and he's figuring it out offensively. He's getting better. He's understanding and picking and choosing his spots really well. He's really effective moving without the basketball. There's moments where you see guys who, rather than him peeling back and looking to get the pass on the perimeter and trying to set the offense up himself, he moves really well without the basketball, right? He's getting more and more established as a cutter and somebody who can move without the basketball, and his teammates are finding him. So that's been a nice little improvement from him. And for Cam Whitmore, Cam continues to just do what he does in his minutes off the bench. He had 12 points in 14 minutes, almost a point per minute off the bench, 5 of 10 shooting, 2 of 6 from the three-point line. He had 4 boards, did have a couple fouls, a little questionable on some of the fouls. And for Cam, he's just got like the ultimate green light, man. He was 3 of 4 inside the three-point line, only 2 of 6 outside the line in this game, and maybe a couple of those threes were a little aggressive. Him maybe shooting a little early in the shot clock, or just defender sagging off him a little bit, so he's just gonna pull the trigger. But that's also what you like about Cam. He's got a he's got a shooter's conscience, right? Like, he just ultimate green light, ultimate confidence in himself. He has never seen a shot that he didn't like, and that's what you want out of a guy who's supposed to be able to fill it up offensively like that. So Cam's going to learn over time how to pick and choose his spots better, how to take shots within the flow of the offense. And he's going to be given hopefully more and more offensive reps and responsibility as the season grows and as he becomes more and more comfortable in the lineup. But just seeing what he does when he's out there in the little bit of runtime that he gets, he looks legit, man. He looks good. So I'm ecstatic with what we've seen out of Cam Whitmore and Amin Thompson in their limited amounts of run. You could have made a very legitimate argument that both of those guys should have played substantially more minutes than they did in this game because of the struggles, right? Again, Jeff Green was, I felt like at times, a non-factor in this game. Dillon Brooks was struggling defensively. Fred VanVleet was struggling in this game. Sengun and Jalen both had it going offensively, but they own, and even Jalen was really solid defensively. Sengun had his shortcomings trying to, close out defensive possessions with the rebounding, but this is one of those games that they shouldn't have lost. And that's why it stings so much. Because when we go back, when we get to the end of the season and we're looking at the standings and the Rockets are going to be, a half game back or a game back or whatever of securing a play-in spot, or if they miss the play-in tournament by like a game or a half game or something like that, if it comes down to if it's like a razor thin race to the play-in tournament, we're going to be looking at a loss like this or losses like this, if there's multiple of them, to point to and say, yep, well, the Rockets could have been in the play-in tournament if they had taken business back in January against the Blazers. So hopefully they learned their lesson from this game. Hopefully Ime Udoka tears into this team and they're able to bounce back because they hit the road trip, and they've got a couple easy ones coming up here with, the Charlotte Hornets, and then I apologize. It's the Charlotte Hornets, and then it is the Brooklyn Nets on the road before they come back to Toyota Center. And Hornets should be an easy game, and Brooklyn should be an easy game, but I'm not going to count those as automatic dubs at all because this team has managed to find a way to surprise us this season, unfortunately. So they need to be able to get back to the level of defense that they were playing earlier this year. But some of that might be personnel limited if guys like Fred and Dillon aren't playing at 100%, if they're not able to lock in and play the defense that they were playing earlier this season, then it's going to be a very, very long second half of the year if you can't get those guys back to playing good point of attack defense in order to get this team back to being one of the top defenses in the NBA, because this team ain't going to be an offensive powerhouse. That's for sure. They're not going to be an offensive phenom. They have to rely on their defense to win games, and they haven't been able to do that in a very long time. They gave up so many rebounds in this game, so many second chance opportunities. Here's a fun stat for you. The Rockets are 0-6 when the opposing team out-rebounds them. So for the Rockets to have a chance to win a game, they need to out-rebound their opponent. And they've largely done that this season, but when they don't out-rebound their opponent, they have literally not been able to win a game at all this season. 0-6 so far on the season. 2 of those games coming in the last 4. So 2 of the last 4 games that they played, they've been out-rebounded by their opponents and subsequently lost those games. I believe it was Knicks and this one against the Blazers, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was Knicks Blazers. But on that note, that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, I appreciate you for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app. Free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe. What was the most frustrating part of this loss for you? Let me know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.